watching NWCN Northwest Cable News. And now, an in-depth half-hour exploring one of the day's top stories. 30 minutes, one topic. This is Northwest Extra with Cam Johnson.
Springer's Odyssey begins a new chapter this week. After her voyage up north, the orphaned Orca is finally released to her family. Now it's up to her to make the most of this rare opportunity. This rescue is one for the textbooks. Nothing like it has ever been tried before, and only Springer can make it a success. Springer swims free. That's the focus of tonight's edition of Northwest Extra. Good evening, I'm Cam Johnson. So here's what's coming up for tonight's show. We will talk to Dr. Paul Spong of Orca Lab at Hansen Island to get his opinion on what has transpired so far, and the very latest, of course. We'll talk to Michael Harris of Orca Conservancy and Bob McLaughlin of Project Seawolf. They watched Springer arrive at Johnstone Strait. They were there to see it all happen. And Kathy Fletcher of People for Puget Sound talks about the success of this mission and the need for more donations and the need to focus on the Puget Sound now. So let's begin with Dr. Paul Spong of Orca Lab. Dr. Spong, we've been hearing some exciting news about what's been happening lately in the last few hours with Springer. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, certainly. It's been an extraordinary day from the beginning, actually. We were tracking Springer and the other whale. She was released, into whose company she was released yesterday overnight, just acoustically, of course. And we were informed this morning about 6 a.m. that she was at the northern end of Blackfish Sound. One of the researchers here, Alexandra Morden, went up and spent some time with her. And then we went up about 7:30, I guess, and spent about 7 or 8 hours up there. And Springer and the other whales were keeping some distance from each other, but in the same general vicinity, and we thought that was very encouraging. And then finally, as the tide turned, first of all, the other group, that's the A-12s and the A-35s, 11 whales, started to head east very slowly in Blackfish Sound on the northern side. And Springer started to head east also on the southern side of Blackfish Sound, about a half a mile behind them. And so the tide, as they went past Orca Lab in Black Knee Pass, was flooding quite swiftly. And first of all, the A-12s, the A-35s went by, and they were just so incredibly relaxed. They were spy hopping and rolling around and just having such an amazingly relaxed time with each other. It just looked like something was up. In any event, Springer came following again about a half a mile behind them. She was really relaxed, just sort of floating along and drifting in the current, and they all sort of disappeared out of our sight and headed towards Johnstone Strait. And when the group of whales got to the corner of Johnstone Strait, they started vocalizing. And then shortly afterwards, Springer started vocalizing. And so they were all vocalizing as they went into Johnstone Strait. And then the bigger group started speeding up, and they headed for the Robson Bight Ecological Reserve fast. And then Springer sped up, and she was traveling at about 5.5 knots as she sort of hurried behind them. And at one point, she was porpoising. She was coming completely out of the water and diving in. And the observers, Graham Allison, John Ford, the DFO scientists who were following them, said it looked like she was chasing fish. In any event, they got down into Robson Bight, and there was this incredible chorus of sound came over our hydrophone system. It just sounded so beautiful, all the whales together in Robson Bight. And Graham told us that Springer herself joined up first with A-55, a young male. And then they all sort of headed out of our immediate hydrophone range down to the rubbing beaches. And when they had this rub, which is sort of a traditional thing that they do down there, she was right in the middle of them, and she was rubbing for a good 10 minutes. And then they came out, and right now they're just sort of still headed east and relatively quietly together, and she's right in among them. It's just been incredible to see all this happening.
So you're saying that today it was a little bit slow in coming, Springer trailing behind for a while, but now Springer is in amongst her family.
Yes, that's correct. She wasn't really trailing behind. There was just a little physical separation. She was in the same space with them, but it was a very quiet. It was very interesting. Vocally, there was just silence. We could not hear any sounds from any of the whales all day long until they finally started to enter Johnstone Strait, and then they began calling.
Where does this leave you now in terms of your prognosis and the way you think that the reunion is, can we call it a successful reunion now, or do you think that more time will tell?
Well, it's certainly incredibly encouraging to see this day unfold. It happened much faster, as a matter of fact, than I thought. We don't have a very great experience with orphans previously, and it has always seemed to us that the process of integration takes a considerable period of time. And so I was personally quite surprised to see it happening so quickly. Whether or not this sort of momentary euphoria that seems to have taken place today translates into a true integration that will continue from here on is not really possible to say at this point. But I do have to say that what has happened today is extremely encouraging to the final outcome.
Amazing. Dr. Spong, we're going to bring in our other guests right now and hope you'll stay with us for at least a few minutes.
Yes,
joining us in our studio is Michael Harris, president of the Orca Conservancy, and Kathy Fletcher of People for Puget Sound. This is amazing. I want to make sure that everybody knows the new news that Springer is with her pod. She's not swimming behind. She's not swimming near. She's in amongst her family members right now. You've got to be ecstatic.
And she's rubbing on rocks. I mean, anybody who knows these orcas know that this is such an exceptional thing for this population, that they found this one beach where the rocks are really smooth and feel really good on the skin, and they come in and rub. And we've known this for 20, 30 years thanks to people like Mike Bigg and some other people. And now Springer has gone in and had a rub on the rocks. And she kept the suction cup tags on, too. She managed to keep them on while she was rubbing, so good for Springer.
And probably even more importantly is that she's kind of mimicking what they're doing, making herself a part of the pod.
Mimicking.
Dr. Spong, is that what you would call it? Does it look like she is trying to mimic the rest of the pod?
I'm not sure if mimic is the correct word, but certainly she's being among them and doing exactly the things that she would do normally as a young orca. And remember, of course, that she had about almost a year of life with the rest of the group, with her mom, as part of the rest of the group before her mom died. So she knew all of these things from her very early life. And what was one of the things that was so interesting and amazing to us right at the beginning here as they entered Johnstone Strait was that she did precisely on cue, as it were, what orcas do when they enter Johnstone Strait.
Really?
She called, and we call these calls announcement calls because they happen so routinely, and we think it's the whales letting the others in the area know who's arriving. So it was just great. And so Springer is really not mimicking. She's just being an orca as part of the group. And
remembering maybe her first year of life.
Yes, absolutely.
That is so exciting. Kathy, your organization has to be thrilled as well.
We are just so excited that this has come to such a wonderful conclusion. And of course, we'll be watching to see what happens through the course of the summer, but it's truly fantastic. And, it's a credit to a lot of people.
And you would like to see, you want to make sure that the focus now broadens a little bit.
Well, I think everybody who's concerned about Springer should also be concerned about all of our orca whales. And the visibility that she has brought to the issue, I think, has been a tremendous reminder that the orca whales here in Puget Sound are in serious, serious trouble. The National Marine Fisheries Service has ducked the question. They refused to list our southern residents on the endangered species list, but they have admitted, as everybody knows, that these are an endangered population. And until we clean up the sound and restore the salmon runs, we're not sure that orca whales have a future here in Puget Sound, and of course, we desperately want them to.
Let's talk a little bit more about Springer's immediate future right now. What are we going to be looking for in the next few days to see, how this continues to go? Michael?
Well, I think Paul pointed it out that we're not quite out of the woods or the kelp forest, whatever it is, but it's so hopeful. I mean, this is it is a euphoric moment. The neat thing about it too is that we have A24s who are really her direct family. Now, these are distant cousins, the 35s and the 12s. We've got A24s down the strait a little ways, or actually quite a ways down on the east, and they're going to sooner or later take a turn, and they might all join up in quite an interesting reunion. So,
Dr. Spong, is there every reason to believe that the rest of her distant relatives are welcoming her?
Oh, I would say so. Really, right from the moment yesterday when all the whales came right into Dongchom Bay, where she was being held in the sea pen, and basically presented themselves. It seemed that there was a welcoming atmosphere, and certainly everything that's happened today is consistent with that. Our sense of the Orca social situation, I think, is that this is a very delicate dance that's being played out here, and there are many sensitivities and things that will happen, I think, over the next while to cement in place what has begun today. But I have to say I'm tremendously encouraged.
Michael, we just have a few more seconds in this block of our show. What do you mean, this delicate dance? What does Dr. Spong mean?
The delicate dance. Well, it's what we know about orcas is probably equaled and probably surpassed by what we don't know. We're not quite sure what they're going to do, but Paul's encouraged, we're encouraged, and a lot of what we know is because of people like Paul Spong, who's been there for 30 years in Orca Lab, and Graham Ellis and John Ford, a lot of the unsung heroes a lot of times, who are giving us this great information and helping this whole process.
It's been amazing. Well, we'd like to share some viewer email from our coverage of the rescue of Springer. Judy from Richland, Washington writes, "It is awe-inspiring to see humans at their best, being compassionate and concerned about another living being." But Kathy writes, "Please, I'm happy for the whale. Now can you get on with the real problems the humans are having? The fires burning their homes might be a good start." And here's one from Molly in Kirkland, Washington. I just can't tell you how great it is to have such a happy story this weekend. It'll be fascinating to watch this story continue to unfold. We'll have more emails in just a bit, but first Mark Coleman has your complete 5-day forecast, and then more on how Springer's doing now, near and in her pod and in the waters of her home.
You're watching NWCN Northwest Extra.
Springer was set free to reunite with her pod on Sunday evening. We are looking back on this amazing weekend's events with some of the participants who helped get her back where she belongs. Joining us on the phone now is Bob McLaughlin of Project Seawolf. He was on board the catamaran that carried Springer home. He joins us from Telegraph Cove, BC, with the rest of the rescuers. We've also got Michael Harris of the Orca Conservancy and Kathy Fletcher of People for Puget Sound. And we're all talking about the exciting news that Springer is not just swimming back behind or on the side of the pod, but is now swimming among her family members. Bob McLaughlin, you've got to be thrilled.
Absolutely thrilled. I mean, we've had good weather up here for watching her. It's been cloudy today, but smooth water conditions. The radio transmitters were working. We've been keeping tabs on her. Yesterday was a little bit discouraging with her trying to go up to other boats. And to the credit of those other boaters, they pretty much ignored her, and that's what was necessary. So we're ecstatic up here. It's just been a great opportunity, but it's hard to believe it was only a weekend.
And Dr. Spong expressed surprise and glee that the integration, we are still in the process of integrating Springer, but that it's going as well as it's going so far in terms of her swimming with her pod. Did you expect it to happen so soon?
I knew they wanted to release her pretty much right away, and it's because they didn't want to get her used to the Donjong Bay. She would find that area and say, well, this is my home now. So they had to release her as quickly as they could, and they did, and it was just a great providence that the pod went by and was curious. She was curious. Again, I have to laugh, and I don't know if you've seen the pictures, as they had her all held together in the net pen before they let her go. She grabs the fish and starts munching on it. And then when they let her go, she takes off like a torpedo, finds a piece of kelp, and sort of goes, oh, this is interesting, and stops off 15 seconds for that, and then, oh, yeah, the whales are out there. Yeah, she's a character.
Yeah, we would all agree with that, and she's a really lovable character too. Michael, you were the one who came in here bursting into our newsroom with the news that Springer had rejoined with her pod, not just trailing behind, but swimming in amongst the pod. Yeah. What did you hear?
Well, I've been bursting a lot lately. It's been quite a bursting weekend here, but no, I mean, I just became very elated to hear about, number one, that she joined the A35s and the A12s, but that she went in for a rub and kind of.
Why is that so significant? Because not being an Orca follower, really, I don't get it. What's so significant?
It has a lot of meaning for the northern population. It's really very, very unique to the northern population of killer whales that they have found this beach where the rocks are just perfect, and they go in there and they rub, and it's a very, very spiritual place for the First Nations people, and it's a protected area, and it's named after Mike Bigg, who was the guy who discovered how to identify wild orcas, who passed away a few years ago. And it's just a very special place, and it's such a perfect place for a reunion for Springer. It just, everything has been so karmic and beautiful about this whole thing.
Kathy, I know that as you listen to this, you probably think of some of the places in the Puget Sound that might be for our orcas, but maybe aren't any longer.
Well, I think the lesson that we should take away from this wonderful story of Springer is that when people intervene with all the best expertise and good intentions and compassion, we can do wonderful things. And if we take that same spirit to Puget Sound, we can clean up Puget Sound, we can restore the salmon, and we can rescue all the whales of Puget Sound and the Strait of Georgia and give them a healthy future. And I think this should be such an empowering moment that we were able to do this great thing for Springer. We can do the same great thing for the rest of the whales. It's a lot more work, and it's going to take a lot more time.
And it's expensive.
But we can do it. And all it takes is the will to do it. And you know, we've got some hard work ahead, but this should be a demonstration to us that when we put our minds to it, we can do really great things. And we've saved one whale, and I think we can save the rest of them.
Well, and people ask me all the time, they say, well, what have we learned from this whole process? And it's like we've learned just as much about orcas, or this particular orca, as we've learned about people. You know, we've learned that how do we work together? Who do we work with? How do we cross a border? How do we work with federal agencies and private organizations? How do we find the money to do this without taking away money from schools and roads? And I think we found the answers. It took a little bit longer, but this is the first time around trying to figure out all these answers. So I think we've learned a lot about people.
Bob, I know that before you leave Telegraph Bay and before you leave the area, you're going to want to see with your own two eyes Springer swimming among her pod.
Well, the thought is actually we may see that this evening. Again, the thing we're trying to do is not get close to them. So we'll see them from a distance. But you know, the rescue crew and stuff, we're here in Telegraph Cove. We've got to go out to what they call the iceberg barge and go out, and that's where we're going to stay tonight. So yeah, we're gonna see what's going on out there. But again, you know, our concern is that she's with this pod now, and there's no outside influences now that could detract from that reunion. So we're going to be careful. We want to recover the radio tags as they slough off, so we'll be following them that way. But, you know, phenomenal news here, and now, of course, we're starting to think about another whale that starts with the letter L.
L98, right?
Luna, yep.
That's the pod that's the whale, the orphaned whale that begins or that belongs back in the Puget Sound.
Right, he's one of the southern residents, and, you know, hopefully either his pod will hook up with him where he is in Nootka Sound, or maybe there's another rescue effort in the offing.
This has got to make it more hopeful for that possibility.
Yeah, actually,
Absolutely.
yeah, no doubt about it.
Okay. Thank you to all of our experts. I want to read a few more emails because we've gotten so many of them. Dean in Bellevue, Washington writes, this overblown orca coverage by the media is a joke. It's not a human, folks. It's a whale. They are not equal to a human, nor deserve the cost and attention it has received. But Jan in Shoreline, Washington counters. The rescue and return and repatriation of Springer to her loving pod has brought tears of joy to my eyes and a feeling that in some infinitesimal way we have begun to repay our debt. And in 2 minutes, how you can respond with your own email. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our experts tonight, Michael Harris, Kathy Fletcher, Dr. Spong, Bob McLaughlin. Thank you all so very much for coming in yet again.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
And we will take your email responses to tonight's Northwest Extra. Just email us at viewercenter@nwcn.com. That's viewercenter@nwcn.com. And that's it for tonight's edition of Northwest Extra.